welcome to Extra.
Thank you.
The main premise of the book, as far as I understand, is that when the vagina is happy and sexually tended to in a very specific way, a woman is at her creative peak.
No, I wouldn't put it that way.
Okay.
What is clear from the last 15 years of quite amazing, I think, new discoveries in neuroscience that show a really strong brain-vagina connection. Just like we now know that there's a strong brain-cardiac health connection with stress, a strong brain-uterus connection. I wrote about it in Misconceptions in terms of childbirth and labor, the effect of the mind on the body. There's a lot of documentation on the brain-vagina connection. The way I would put it, which I think is more empowering and more, I would say, more accurate, is that when there's a culture that supports a woman, whoever she is, whatever her sexuality, whatever her situation in life, whether she's in or out of a relationship, in knowing about, expressing, activating her own sexual pleasure, this boosts dopamine in her brain. And dopamine is a neurotransmitter which goes to confidence, confidence, assertiveness, sociability, focus, motivation. Sexual pleasure makes women harder to subordinate, harder to control. But let's also look at like women's sexual happiness, or lack of it. So we're 40 years into the sexual revolution, and the numbers suck for women in sexual happiness. 30% of women don't reach orgasm when they want to, and they define that as a problem for them.
Right.
This has not budged since Sheer Heights report in 1976. And 30%, some of the same women, some different women, have low libido that they define as a problem for them. They're not into it. It's not happening for them. And when I did this research, I understood why that was. We're operating with a model of what female desire and arousal are that is not accurate. It's 40 years out of date.
Right.
And one example is that Masters and Johnson, which kind of locked in our idea of what is female sexuality, they said, well, male and female sexual cycles are the same: arousal, plateau, climax, resolution. But the new science shows that's not true. They're not the same. They're different in terms of their neural wiring.
Yeah.
And this is fascinating. You know, male neural wiring around the grid of nerves around the penis is very regular. Female pelvic innervation, as it's called, is incredible, and we're not taught about it in 8th grade.
Yeah.
There's neural termini in the clitoris, we know about that. There's neural termini in the mouth of the cervix. They've just identified a new sexual center at the mouth of the cervix. Neural termini at the walls of the vagina. The perineum is a sexual center for women. It gets cut in childbirth routinely.
Yes.
Neural termini at the anus, right? So it's like this amazing tangle of sexual potential in the female pelvis.
Okay, so when you discuss that, is the implication that female sexuality, based on our neurology, it's more complex than male sexuality?
Certainly it's more complex, but it's also potentially more, I mean, I don't like value judgments, I don't like comparisons better or worse, but there's a lot more going on, let's put it that way.
I would contest that actually in certain ways, but I'd also like to say that I find that this whole idea that the brain is connected to the vagina, I'm surprised that this is so revelatory to you. And I wonder if straight women are so out of touch with their vaginas.
How do you know I'm straight?
And you being a Rhodes Scholar.
No, hold on a minute, that's a big assumption.
Well, I agree it's a big assumption, but I think you also wrote this book, as you stated outright, for primarily a heterosexual female audience.
I didn't say that, and I'm glad that you're bringing this up, because there is a paragraph that is not worded, it's being misread, and I probably didn't word it as carefully as I should have, that I'd like to address. I wrote this book for everybody. One of my role models of couples in this book is Gertrude Stein and Alice B. Toklas.
Right.
And about how her creativity took off after she, I think, had a sexual awakening with Alice B. Toklas. Often I use he or she as the pronoun of the lover. So this book is for everyone, and my readers are everyone. However, what I meant to say in that paragraph is that the data on a lot of this scientific data in the database is based on heterosexuality. So there's a dearth in the data. And there's a weakness in the scientific database. And now I know why, because I've done some additional research. Jesse Helms in the 80s had the United States Congress pass a legislation basically that meant that the National Institute of Health wouldn't fund research that had the words homosexual or lesbian in the title. So you really can't get funding to study.
Okay, but that does not actually stop queer people from researching their own lives and also experimenting in their own ways. Like, we don't need the permission of someone like Jessie Helms to do this kind of work and also share it within our own cultures.
Sure, that's true.
But I mean, again, like, this revelation that there was a connection between the brain and the vagina, I think, you know, I mean, and I was like, especially for a Rhodes Scholar, like, this was so revelatory to you. I don't understand that, because even the most basic science books by someone like Mary Roach or Norman Deutsch, like, they all cover these connections. And so I guess I wonder how you missed the boat on that information.
Well, I think that's, I would contest that I missed the boat. Of course, I cite Mary Roach, and of course I'm aware of, you know, the major books that were written about the... Mary Roach talks about the brain-vagina connection, but she doesn't talk about the emotional states that go along with it. In fact, her book is quite dispassionate. But really, what nobody that I read was making connections about the political implications of dopamine, for example, and that's my job as a cultural critic.
Yeah.
And frankly, I was never really interested in that science that much in the past, because I hadn't had my own firsthand medical crisis that showed me how bleak life would be, you know, without a vagina, basically. Yeah. You know, Mary Roach doesn't interview women who've had rape in war, you know, traumatic rape with blunt objects, as I did in Sierra Leone with refugees in a refugee camp, and she, you know, didn't talk to people who work with women with vulvodynia. It's a very different focus. You know, so her work is very good, but it's not that I didn't know that there was a brain-vagina connection. Duh, that's obvious.
Yeah.
But what is new is, for instance, and probably new to you, Mary Roach doesn't cite it, is research like Yannico Georgiadis and his team, who found that there's a part of the female brain that goes quiet, that has in orgasm, that has to do with self-consciousness and self-control. And that is really interesting to me as a student of Victorian literature, because there are all these great novels that women novelists have written in which there's this fear of an attraction to being swept away, loss of control. So there are plenty of people who've written about the neuroscience of the brain, fewer who have written about the brain-vagina connection. Luann Brezendine kind of addresses it. But I'm a cultural critic and I'm a student of literature, and it's my job to look at that and look at women's real lives, look at interviews that women gave me, look at literature, and look at politics especially, and say, wow, maybe this has some clues to us about A, why women are so sexually unhappy, and B, why female sexuality has been targeted, why the vagina has been derided for so long.
You know, I think, yeah, and all of that is true, but I think one of the things that I did find difficult about this is, well, first of all, I mean, on one hand, you're saying that every vagina is different neurologically. We're all different. But on the other hand, then you go to this tantric workshop facilitated by Charles Muir, and he talks about this spot called the yoni nadi inside a woman that every woman has, and he's very specific about this exact location. And that's contradictory in a way to the theory that we're all different. And I also find that it's not very helpful. Like, there's a sort of a colonizing of the female geography, because it implies that there's all these spots and locations that we need to have awareness of to be sexual creatures. And I also think that engenders a kind of competitiveness and pressure, and I don't think that women need that. And I will say that I have this feeling a lot when people, social critics, are researching science, pseudoscience, and also, you know, sort of Eastern esoteric spiritual practices. And I want to ask you your thoughts on that.
I mean, I think you've raised a really interesting question, Sasha. I guess it's one I don't agree with. I mean, certainly people could take any new information and use it competitively. But if you go through my book, there's one little section where I tell heterosexual men to be nice to heterosexual women, which has shoulds in it. Everywhere else, there's no shoulds. I don't care what people do. You know, I grew up in San Francisco in the 70s. I grew up at the heart of the gay and lesbian community. My mother was writing the first book about lesbian sexuality for an academic press. She, you know, spent my teenage years in lesbian bars. You know, I mean, I had dykes on bikes at my bat mitzvah. You know, it's like, I grew up in an atmosphere of complete sexual openness. And I don't have an ideological point of view about what people should do. On the contrary, I do think it's always empowering. And as a feminist, I believe in giving people information.
Right.
And as long as it's good, solid information. So what I was interested in, so first of all, you know, you can look at the Netter image that I cite in the book about female pelvic innervation. You can decide for yourself if you want to play around with where the neural termini are. You know, a lot of my readers have had amazing, surprising experiences. I didn't understand my own anatomy. I mean, I always thought I knew about sexuality. I wouldn't have complained. But now that I actually have seen where the hell the neural termini are, it's radically changed my understanding of my own body. So, you know, you can take it or leave it, but it certainly isn't offered in a competitive spirit. But hold on, about the yoni nadi or whatever, the sacred spot. I'm really interested in outcomes, right? And I interviewed so many women who are unhappy, who are not, I mean, I don't know what your sexuality is. Maybe this is a bigger deal with heterosexual women, but a lot of heterosexual women do not reach orgasm in bed with their partners.
And
that's not okay,
yeah.
right? So I'm interested in, well, who is working with women in a way that lets them have pleasure?
But working with women in a very specific way too. Like this book, you know, I mean, a lot of the criticism is about Naomi Wolf wrote a book about her vagina. It's not about your vagina.
Pages, thank you very much.
It's about a vagina, but it's also about a very specific vagina. To me, it's about the vagina that can afford to go to tantric sex workshops on the weekend and has time to devote to an hour and a half of yoni massage with a male partner who you know, and also can afford to go see, you know, yoni massage practitioners and so on.
So
there's very little, but I want
yeah.
to make this point too.
Yeah.
You know, there's a part in the book where, you know, this woman talks about maybe being broken because she masturbated with a vibrator. I think that there is a profound disrespect towards other sexual expressions that might take you to a creative place, and I will include in that masturbation, BDSM, celibacy, for example, and this whole idea that we can only find a creative, you know, a really profound creative place if we are sexually happy in a very particular way. And I think that's misguided.
So I'm listening. I don't agree that that's the book I wrote at all. I say that women deserve sexual happiness. I never say it has to be this way or that way, ever. I say that women can, you know, have pleasure with masturbation in or out of a relationship. I make that absolutely clear.
But this is not the highest form of finding creativity.
That's not, you cannot find a place in the book where I said that women have to be in a relationship to find the highest form of creativity. And actually, the point about creativity has to do with dopamine. You can get the dopamine boost by yourself or with a partner, but it is true that sexual pleasure gives women dopamine. I didn't make that up. Now, let's talk about privileging. It's really interesting to me. I think this book, because a lot of people have projected onto the book things that are not there. And I think it kind of acts as a Rorschach, the way that the vagina in a way acts as a Rorschach. Things that are not there. So I researched a retreat center that was having really good outcomes with women. And what I took away from it is that, and people with no money at all or lots of money can make use of this, and my readers come from all economic backgrounds, that, you know, most women are struggling, well, certainly heterosexual women, because the average woman takes 16 minutes to reach orgasm, the average men 4. You know, lesbian readers do not say that this is an issue for them. There are other issues that they raise that they say my book has helped them with.
All right, well, I guess we're going to wrap it up then. Naomi, thank you so much for talking to us here at Xtra.
Thank you.
And good luck.
Thank you.